Okay, we can start whenever you're ready.
Yeah, whenever you guys want to go.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this introduction. It says, "We are excited to welcome our special guest today. Kristen Gowdy is a Paralympic NGB press officer with the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Her previous jobs included working with the Women's Sports Foundation and with the U.S. Bobsled and Skeleton. Kristen has a degree in journalism and sports studies with Ithaca College. She grew up in Santa Barbara, California, and currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. When she is not working, she can be found reading, running, playing basketball, cooking, or writing. Welcome, Kristen. Maybe you can start out by telling us a little bit about what it is you do."
Sure. Thanks for that. Thanks for the intro. As she said, my name is Kristen. I currently work for the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. I basically do communications and social media, digital media, media relations, PR, kind of whatever they need me to do for some of the Paralympic sports. And if you don't know, the Paralympics are the term means parallel Olympics. So they are basically the Olympics for people with physical disabilities. So I work with track and field, cycling, swimming, alpine skiing, Nordic skiing, and snowboarding. So I run their social media pages and do their websites, as well as try and just get their stories. All the athletes have just incredible stories. So getting their stories out there into the world.
Why did you choose your career and how did you get started?
It's a really good question. I grew up playing sports. I played basketball my whole life, but also did a ton of other sports, and just sort of realized that was what I wanted to do my whole life. I was not a very gifted athlete. I played basketball in college, but was never going to go pro, and realized that I just wanted to keep working in sports. And I did an internship with USA Bobsled and Skeleton in college, and was able to get hired with them after graduating, and worked for them for a couple years. And kind of fell in love with the Olympic and Paralympic movement, and also just kind of advocating for equality in sports. So yeah, that was kind of how I decided I wanted to do that. And just have always loved writing. I'm not a math person by any means, so writing, graphic design, video editing, that kind of stuff, just telling stories was something that I always loved to do. So that those two things kind of fit together, and that's how I decided on my career.
Is there anything you don't like about your career?
I think that it's pretty demanding. Working in sports is a huge privilege. I'm really lucky to be able to do something that I love to do, and something that I'm so passionate about. But it is super demanding. I travel a lot, which is good and bad. Well, I do during non-pandemic times. So it's definitely really busy. Lots of hours. But it's really rewarding to see athletes when they win their Paralympic medal or Olympic medal, and just knowing that you had some small part of that. So I think the demands are challenging at times, but it's all kind of worth it in the end.
What is the most exciting thing about your career, and do you have any cool stories to share?
I think the most exciting part of my career is just being able to kind of be a part of some of the, events that people are, watching on TV at home. I got to go to the 2018 Olympics in Korea with the bobsled and skeleton team, and worked throughout those. And it just, was so cool getting to be there. And I had never been to Korea, I had never been to Asia at all. So just getting to experience that culture, that, Korea is not a place that I probably would have traveled in my life had I not been working there at that time. So, getting to see places that I never would have seen if it weren't for my job has been huge for me.
How did you decide or figure out what you wanted to do as a career?
Ooh, that's it. I think that, that kind of goes along a little bit with just, my love for sports. Can't say that enough. I was kind of obsessed and still am pretty obsessed with sports. I, just from a really early age, I think knew that I wanted that to be, my life. And just, kind of fell in love with the fact, well, not fell in love with this, but fell in love with advocating for equality. So, women in sports, disabled athletes in sports, racial minorities, LGBTQ plus folks, they don't get the same coverage, they don't get the same opportunities, they don't get the same pay. And so, that's so important to me, is just kind of trying to even that playing field a little bit, which is why, I worked for the Women's Sports Foundation for a while, which was just opened my eyes to so much of that. And, I got to interview a lot of really cool people through that. We were founded by Billie Jean King, who is one of the leaders in equality in sports. And so, got to interact with her quite a bit, interviewed Megan Rapinoe before, talked to some of these leaders in sports who are changing the game for women, but also for all of those other groups who are excluded. And just, I kind of realized that was really important for me. And that's something that I experienced as a female athlete, but also saw, friends who fall into those other categories experiencing as well. And so when the Paralympics job came up, that was something that I really wanted to do, because, disabled athletes are just as elite as the able-bodied athletes are, but they don't get nearly the amount of respect or coverage that their able-bodied counterparts do. So yeah, that's kind of how I realized what I wanted to do.
Is there anything about your career that surprised you, or that other people find surprising about what you do?
I think right now other people just find the Paralympics and the concept of the Paralympics surprising. A lot of people don't know what the Paralympics are. So props if you already knew about them. But I talk to a lot of people about what I do, and they have no idea. They know about the Olympics, but don't know that right after the Olympics, in the same places, there's 2 weeks of competitions in the same sports for athletes with disabilities. And to me, those stories are even more inspiring, just overcoming obstacles and, kind of redefining stereotypes about people with disabilities. And it surprises me how many people don't know about that, but that's, kind of my goal, is to get those stories out there and make sure more people do.
What is the most rewarding thing about your career?
Probably just telling the stories. Like these athletes that I work with, a lot of their names are not known in the world. So getting their stories out there, they're not the big name athletes of the world, but they deserve to have their stories told. They work just as hard, they get paid a heck of a lot less. And, they deserve it. So just probably telling those stories, and if I can help an athlete get a sponsorship because of a story that was published that I wrote or whatever, it's just super rewarding to be, a small part of that journey that they're on towards a medal.
What were the steps you took to get where you are now?
Good question. So coming out of high school, I was recruited to play basketball at Ithaca College, which is a Division III school. I chose it because it had a great basketball program, but also I knew that I wanted to major in journalism. And it was really appealing to me because they also had a sports studies program, which I had not seen anywhere else that I had looked. And went there, played basketball for 2 years, and then realized that I was kind of committing too much time to my college sport. I loved it. I loved playing basketball, but I realized that I kind of wanted to do, other things as well, other extracurriculars. So I actually quit the basketball team after 2 seasons, and really focused more on, the journalism side, the internships in college, which are so important, like just getting that real world experience. Was fortunate to find some internships that paid in college, so I could afford to live away from home and, pay for food and stuff. And I think that those are probably the most important things that led me to that first job with USA Bobsled and Skeleton. And just kind of taking everything as it comes, and never letting an opportunity go if it feels right. And I think those are some of the biggest steps.
So what is was it tough to quit basketball?
Yeah, it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I loved playing college basketball. I loved being an athlete. I still love being an athlete. I've taken up running, which is both great and terrible as well. So it was a really hard decision. It took me probably a full 9 months to make that decision, from about midway through my sophomore season till the summer that I was coming back from my junior year. yeah, that was like probably the hardest decision. But I stayed really involved with basketball. I played, in rec leagues and still do in New York. I live in New York City right now. So before the pandemic, was playing in a lot of co-ed rec leagues and women's leagues around the city. So um, yeah, I think just because you're not playing it at that highest level anymore doesn't mean that you can't be involved in it. Still a huge fan, still watch March Madness, and just definitely still very involved with basketball, even if and was then, even if I wasn't playing at that level that I was before.
What team are you rooting for in March Madness?
Ooh, well, my boyfriend went to UNC, so I was rooting for UNC, but they got their butts kicked in the first round. So I don't know. I'm actually much more into the women's tournament than the men's. I think UConn's going to win this year, but I would like Oregon to win. My parents live in Oregon right now, so I've kind of latched onto their women's team. But I don't know about the men's. I think I have Gonzaga winning in my bracket, but my bracket's also doing horribly, so it doesn't really matter.
What made you move to New York?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to college in New York. I had always kind of wanted to live somewhere else. I grew up in California and just have always kind of been, adventurous, kind of had wanderlust and wanted to, experience as much of the country and as much as the world as I could. So, the move for college, I kind of thought, well, I'll go out there for 3 years. And Ithaca is in upstate New York. It's not in the city at all. So went to college there for 4 years and, just kind of fell into it, honestly. My first job was in Lake Placid, New York, which is a very, very small town in the mountains of upstate New York. And that was a bit small for me, but this new job was my Women's Sports Foundation job was in New York City. And I had a lot of friends from college that had moved to New York City. So made a lot of sense for me to come down here and was really excited about that move, and I love it here. It's been really tough with the pandemic. A lot of the things that you would normally do in New York City are closed or really restricted, so that's made it a little bit tougher. And working remotely from a small apartment is an adjustment for sure. But yeah, no, I love New York City. I'll be here for a while, I think. But my new job, I just started this job with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and that's actually technically based in Colorado. They're letting me stay remote for a while, but I may end up in Colorado at some point. I'm just kind of going with the flow, going wherever it takes me.
How has COVID affected your job or your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was working for the Women's Sports Foundation when kind of the pandemic hit. Obviously, we went remotely. A lot of our programming went remote. So we do, at the nonprofit, we do a lot of programming for girls programs across the country. We give grants, and then we also work with elite athletes as well. So obviously all the elite athletes had their sports shut down. A lot of the girls programs across the country had their sports shut down, their sports programs or clubs or whatever they were doing. So a lot of our programming went virtual, which put a lot more weight on me as our kind of digital content person. I was managing a lot of that. So my job actually got a lot crazier when the pandemic started because we couldn't do those in-person events. And then, just starting this job that I'm currently in now, I think the biggest thing that's been impacted is just the events. Sports is such an event-based industry that it's been really different not having those events. Have had to find a lot of, creative ways to tell athlete stories without having the athlete there to interview or having the competitions going on to write stories about. So we're fortunately getting back to normal a little bit with that. The Tokyo games are on for the summer, which is really exciting. So hopefully things are starting to get back to normal as people get vaccinated, and once those events it'll be back to the craziness. But it's definitely different. I think people have realized that remote work is doable. And yeah, I think that was a little bit of a tangent, but the biggest thing is the events have gone away. And so that's caused some challenges.
Do you focus more on the Winter Olympics, or do you do Summer Olympics as well?
Yeah, so I do both. I work with 6 sports in the Paralympic space, and 3 of them are summer sports and 3 of them are winter sports. So I do both.
Okay. And then with your writing, do you write about the athletes that you meet, or do they like seek you out and ask to have interviews with you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I work for the teams. So the athletes know me. I'm on staff, so it's not like I'm a journalist from a newspaper going to them or anything. But I will typically, if I hear about something cool one of the athletes is doing, or if they're doing really well in their competitions, I'll typically seek them out. But they know I'm coming just from the team, and they're typically pretty willing to do interviews and have stories written about them, and all those stories just go up on the teamusa.org website. So they know exactly where the stories are going, and they know that these stories are designed to showcase them in the best light, because we want to always showcase our team in the best light. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. But or the other option is I'm on the ground, so I'm traveling to competitions, which hasn't happened very much lately, but if I'm at a competition, I can get interviews there as well. And typically it's just going up to the athlete and asking them for a few minutes of their time.
So I'm not sure if I asked you this, but what do you love the most about your career?
I think you did, but I can come up with another one if you want me to. I do love also that like no 2 days are the same. Like really just working with 6 sports, everybody's in season sometimes, out of season sometimes, and there's just no consistency, which I kind of love. It keeps it exciting and keeps it fresh all the time. And I get bored pretty easily, so I enjoy doing things differently every day and having different tasks to do. It's not just doing the exact same thing for 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. It's really dynamic and changing. It involves some weekend work, it involves some night work, but it's something that I really love to do.
What would you say are the most important skills or habits that someone should develop if they're interested in a career like yours?
Yeah, I think work ethic is probably the biggest one. So just working really hard. I think I developed that as an athlete, playing basketball. And sounds like a lot of you guys are involved in sports as well. But you can develop that through anything. You can develop it through schoolwork, through music, through theater, whatever you guys love to do. Work ethic is huge. Just showing whoever you're working with that you're a really, really hard worker and willing to learn is big. And then also just kind of willingness to do anything. A lot of times in sports, you kind of have to go outside of your job description. I've done everything from driving a bobsled in a 12-passenger van down to Washington, D.C. from New York. I've sorted clothes for the athletes. I've brought them water. It's like it's anything. Even though that's not in my job description, that's something that when you work on a small team and a small staff, which a lot of sports organizations are, it's something that everybody kind of has to pitch in and get everything done, regardless of what your job description might be. And I was sorting clothes, but like our CEO was right next to me doing the same thing. So it goes top to bottom. Everybody's got to be willing to pitch in. And then in terms of like technical skills, I think just a strong writing base is really important. And just picking up as many skills as you can, whether it's graphic design or video editing or interview skills, which you are already doing. You're doing a great job with the interviews. So yeah, those are kind of some important skills to pick up.
If you could go back and give your teenage self some evidence, what would it be? Some advice.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think just taking opportunities as they come. I was really lucky to have, be able to have some mentors in the form of coaches and program leaders throughout my, childhood and into high school that taught me a lot about just kind of when opportunities are there, take them. And, some you're going to love and some you're not going to love so much, but, just building your resume and building, your skill set and finding out what you love to do. Like I took an internship in college that I thought I was going to be a journalist. I majored in journalism, thought that I was going to work for a newspaper out of college, but I took a internship in college that was more communications and digital media, which is what I do now, and realized I loved that more than journalism. So that completely changed my career path. But if I hadn't taken that chance and taken a job or an internship opportunity that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, I never would have discovered that. So just kind of flexing with opportunities, taking them as they go, being adaptable is huge. That's probably what I'd tell my teenage self.
Okay, I think we're going to do a Q&A. And
sure.
One second. Lindsay's going to help me.
Hi, Lindsay. I worked with Lindsay's brother. He's on the skeleton national team. So I worked with him when I was at bobsled skeleton.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that's how I met Kristen while she was doing her job with
Oh, I can hear you talking in the background, but I don't think your mic is on. Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so like Kristen said, I met her through my brother, who is on the US bobsled skeleton team, and I met her while she was working. She was doing her job. So I'm just going to explain how we're going to do the Q&A here really quick, and then I'll turn the time back over to you guys. So we will go ahead and turn on your cameras. You will, like I didn't do, you'll need to unmute yourself to ask the questions, but you'll just try not to interrupt each other. But if you unmute your mic, and then you can just one at a time go ahead and ask any questions you have for Kristen about her personally. She's totally entitled to say no, she doesn't want to answer questions, but
I am an open
just about her, about her job, about her experiences, anything that you're curious about. So we'll go ahead and turn your cameras on, and then we can start with the Q&A.
Hi. Oh, I didn't realize you guys were all in the same room. Oh, that's cool. I thought you were all logging in from separate computers. Or there's a couple of you logged in from separate computers. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we've got a couple of groups. Our teen centers are logged in together as a group.
Nice.
So we've got
that's
a
awesome.
couple of different cameras going, but we will turn the time over to our teens to ask any questions they have.
Sure.
We got a question.
What's it like being able to help people who can't do things for themselves?
That's awesome, and that's a really good question. And something that I've realized is that these athletes that have disabilities can do everything that we can do, and a lot of things better. It's not so much of a me helping them kind of thing as much as them helping themselves, and they're elite athletes just like the Olympians are. And so I really haven't had to help them do anything. My job is really just to tell their stories and to make sure that they are getting coverage and make sure that their stories are being told. Is skeleton scary? Yes. I think Lindsay can attest to that. Her brother is a very, very good skeleton athlete. I tried skeleton once and it was terrifying. it was too much. But you're going 80 miles per hour head first on your stomach down an ice track. It's wild.
It's definitely crazy. And if you guys want, I can show you video some other time, but it's super cool.
It's pretty crazy. They don't, to the point where they don't, if you're just trying it for fun, they don't let you go from the top of the track because you will hurt yourself. So I went from a much lower point on the track so that I would not hit 80 miles per hour, which would have been horrible and I would have injured myself terribly.
Did you play a lot of sports when you were younger?
Yeah, I played a ton of sports. I realized basketball was a sport that I wanted to keep going with, but I also played softball, soccer, swimming. I did taekwondo. I have a black belt in taekwondo. Those were the main ones, I think. Yeah, softball and basketball ended up kind of being my main sports, but yeah, definitely played a ton of sports. And I think, you know, the more you can play, more sports you can play when you're younger, the better. So keep doing that.
How long have you played softball for?
I played softball until my sophomore year of high school. So I played for the high school team for a couple of years and then decided that basketball was what I wanted to focus on. So then I just shifted to only focusing on basketball. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
What's your favorite sport?
Oh, come on, that's basketball. I am constantly watching basketball, playing basketball, making my boyfriend play basketball with me, which he does not like. He's not a big basketball guy, but yeah, no, I would play basketball and be watching basketball all the time if I could.
So in your experience as an athlete yourself, and then having worked with athletes, would you recommend that teens or young people like start to specialize early, or do you think it's better to kind of broaden their experience and play as many sports as they can?
I think you play as many sports as you can. I think kids right now are parents are just starting to specialize their kids so young, and I think that, you know, unless a kid really wants to play one sport and that's all they want to do, that's totally fine. But if you know, want to get a bunch of experience in other sports, I think that's what you should do. You shouldn't, you know, limit yourself early. I didn't specialize until I was 16, 17, somewhere around there, and even that was purely my choice. You know, my parents didn't push me to do that or anything. That was something that I wanted to do. So yeah, play as many sports as you can, have a great time doing it. And, you know, if you want to specialize later, that's great. And if not, just keep playing all the sports. You know, a lot of people don't have the goal of playing in college or don't have the goal of playing professionally. And sports are still just such a great way to have fun and stay in shape and make friends and be part of a team. So yeah, I would recommend doing as much of them as you can.
What inspired you to work at the Olympics?
To work with the Olympics? Oh, that's a great question. You know, I don't know. I just kind of realized that I loved the idea of the fact that, you know, hundreds of athletes that are at the top of their respective sports come together every 4 years, or every 2 years, I guess, if you're going summer and winter, but to compete against other countries. I kind of love the international aspect of it. I think a lot of sport, you know, NBA, WNBA, NFL, MLB, those are all very US focused, whereas the Olympics are just the entire world, which I thought was so cool. I think that's what I really love about it. It's just given me the opportunity to meet athletes from other countries, meet people who are doing my job, but for other countries. I became good friends with the person who did my job, but for Brazil, when I was with the bobsled team. And yeah, I think just getting that interaction and seeing other cultures is something that I love about the Olympics and the Paralympics.
Is your job like different in the different countries? Like how different was what you did, different than the person from Brazil?
That's a super good question. No, they're actually fairly similar. One big difference between the US and other countries is that other countries get funding for their Olympic and Paralympic teams from their government, and the US doesn't. So the US relies only on sponsorships, basically sponsorships, and if NBC will pay to put them on TV. So we rely a lot more heavily on attracting sponsors and getting money that way so that we can fund the athletes and fund the teams. But other countries kind of have that instilled because their government funds their Olympic and Paralympic teams, which is great in my opinion. So that's kind of the biggest difference. But no, I mean they were really doing the same. I met quite a few, I met the counterpart from Britain, and there were so many people who were all doing the same job, but for different countries. And that was such a cool experience. And it was all just, we were all super supportive, even though, our countries might be competitive with each other, but we kind of all were really respectful of each other and just recognized that, we were all had the same goal for our countries. And so my position is not necessarily competing with the person from Brazil, competing with each other. So it was kind of fun that way where we could be friends, but still, kind of have that friendly competition going.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you do bobsledding and skeleton, right?
I worked for them. Yeah, I didn't actually compete. I wasn't an athlete.
Since you did that, have you ever seen the movie Cool Runnings?
I love the movie Cool Runnings about the Jamaican team.
Bro, I'm singing the song. Come on, man. Never mind.
Yes, I highly recommend Cool Runnings if you guys haven't seen Cool Runnings. That is the bobsled, and that's what I worked for. But the U.S. team, not the Jamaican team.
As a woman in sports, what kind of challenges did you face growing up throughout college, and what is some advice you can give these teens to help kind of promote that equality that is starting to get going nowadays?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And, growing up as an athlete, I never had female athlete role models. I think that, that's something that we've gotten a lot better at. I think, for me in basketball, I think WNBA players are now much more in the spotlight than they were when I was a kid. But, growing up, I idolized NBA players and I wanted to be the first woman in the NBA. And that was not going to happen. I was not very good. It was not going to be me if there was going to be a woman in the NBA. But, I think that having role models and having female role models for young girls and women is so important. And that's something that the Women's Sports Foundation really works to do and provide as well. But yeah, I think that was one of the biggest challenges growing up. I never really was able to see women who looked like me or didn't look like me, but just other women doing sports at the highest level. I kind of always thought that college was the highest level I could achieve as a woman athlete. And whereas my brother's actually a minor league baseball player, and he always knew that he could go to the MLB. And so he, always had those dreams that were just very cut and dry. So it was a lot easier for him to dream big than it was for me. And then just working in sport, I think I've been really lucky. I've worked with a lot of really great people, and actually I've worked with a lot of women who have been great mentors to me. But I think, occasionally there will be people who think that you don't know as much about sports because you're a woman, when in fact you usually know more than they do about sports. There's a lot of people on Twitter who think that they know a lot more than you do about sports. But yeah, no, I think that, overall, I think that women, I think that people of color, I think, any way that people can be discriminated against, they are, unfortunately. And I think that just opening doors for those groups to get into leadership roles and to have a voice is so important. So that's kind of what I try to do with these athletes now, and with the athletes I was working with at the Women's Sports Foundation, and just really making sure that women and other groups of traditionally marginalized people are in the spotlight. I think that's so important. That was a really good question. Oh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Guys, go ahead in the back, please.
If you would have done journalism, do you think you would have switched to what you're now?
Did you say if I didn't do journalism, what would I have done? Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, that's really hard. I thought about going into like sports management and being, kind of more like in the front office, on the front office side of things, doing operations and event scheduling and that kind of stuff. But realized at the end of the day that I wanted to do the storytelling aspect of it. But my college also had a really good sport management program that was very intriguing to me. But in the end, I decided on journalism.
Oh, what kind of shoes do you like?
What kind of shoes do I like? Oh man, I was always a Kobe wearer, or the Hyper Dunks. I'm assuming we're talking about basketball shoes. I'm kind of a huge shoe head. But yeah, definitely Hyper Dunks were the way to go. I have terrible ankles, so anything with high ankle support. But I wore Kobe's until I sprained my ankles a gazillion times, and then switched over to Hyper Dunks that had the better ankle support.
Does anyone have any more questions?
Sadie's got one more.
My friend asked if you support the LGBT plus community.
I could not hear that. I'm sorry. I don't know why.
My friend asked, are you supporting the LGBT plus community?
I don't know why. Is the mic off? I'm so sorry.
So you're gonna have to get a little closer to the microphone, like real close to the camera.
You're a little louder. He's gonna ask.
Do you support the LGBTQ plus community?
Absolutely. Definitely. That's a really good question. That's something that's also very important in sports. Thank you for yelling that at me. Sorry, I'm old. I can't hear anything. But yes, definitely. Absolutely. They should have the exact same rights as everybody else.
Who's your favorite basketball player?
You guys ever heard of Sabrina Ionescu? She played for Oregon. She now plays in the WNBA. She's a freaking boss. She's the best basketball player I've ever seen. Skill-wise.
Does anyone else have any more questions? Okay. Well, since there's no more questions, I'll just say thank you so much for being here today. It was great talking to you. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and asked such great questions. A recording of this chat will be available on our YouTube channel later today if you want to go back and rewatch. Thanks again for being here and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. And thank you so much. You did a great job moderating.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.